1 out of every 10 people has unclaimed money waiting out there for them, and sometimes the amounts can be eye-popping. So could there be big money out there for you? Searching takes 10 minutes, and we have a complete unclaimed money guide on our website, goodmorningamerica.com, on Yahoo. Josh? Good hagglers save themselves an average of 10 to 15%, so it is worth it to learn. That's why we went undercover with multiple hidden cameras to teach you. Everybody always worries that their neighbor got a better car deal than they did. Well, we know from Edmunds data that we paid $1,000 less than the average consumer does for that same type of vehicle, all with some good negotiating. So we tagged along with the West Virginia Treasurer's Office as they performed their version of the Prize Patrol. Even if you don't think you've left any of your own money lying around, it's a good idea to search to see if deceased family members have left money for you, and we will link you to a couple of websites where you can do that research.
This is pretty common.
It certainly is. I mean, have you left a list of your assets somewhere that your heirs can find it if you die? I haven't, but I will now.
Allie's going to make me now. Okay, thanks very much, Eli.
There are 110 strategies in my book for saving big money on your most common expenses, and I used just 6 of those strategies to help the Strickland family of Virginia save big. They're all easy to do, and wait till you see the grand total. And $16,000 of that savings is immediate and will repeat every year, and I only counted each strategy once, so that will really add up over time. The other $148,000 from prepaying their mortgage will take place over the next 12 years. Best of all, they don't have to change their lifestyle, and these are all easy to do. I vowed here on GMA that next I would make over a family with a significant amount of debt. I wanted to show that even for people in that tough situation, there are smart moves you can make to get out from under the bills and save big. And it worked. Watch. And I also found the show blocks big savings on their groceries, their prescriptions, and a way for Jill or any college graduate to wipe out close to $5,000 of their student loans. You can get the nuts and bolts of those strategies on our website, abcnews.com, and of course the nitty-gritty details about how to pull off all of these savings ideas are in my book. We went to the University of Maryland because it is a world leader in the fields of food safety and microbiology, and we tried out different soaps and sanitizers. Did a small informal test, which basically entailed washing our hands until they were raw. But we got some interesting answers. Good morning. So during our undercover shopping spree, clerks told us they usually switch out their makeup samples just once a year, which means when you use them, it's kind of like sharing your cosmetics with hundreds, maybe even thousands of strangers.
Yeah? So what is the worst?
Do you have a guess?
I would say lipstick, based on what you said.
I thought that too, but actually that's not true.
No?
The eyeshadow and foundation tied for the worst, and there was no difference between the most upscale of department stores and the most regular drugstore.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I like when you go undercover like that.
Your morning gross out.
Thanks, Lee.
What I have here is the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act.
Don't hurt yourself.
And it is a thick one.
Right.
And we counted, and 10 sections deal with things like derivatives
Right.
and systemic risk, and 5 talk about credit scores
Right.
and mortgages. Persuade me that this law matters to ordinary Americans.
Oh, it matters in so many ways. And keep in mind, first of all, that this is building off a number of laws that we've passed during the course of the last 18 months that are directly addressing problems that consumers are experiencing. So let me just give you some examples that I think your viewers will be familiar with. When it comes to credit cards, this law says that we are going to have a single agency that's going to be able to enforce rules that prohibit hidden fees, that make sure that there's a 45-day notice period before a credit card company can jack up your rates, that if they're going to increase your rates, they can't increase those rates on the existing balances, only on future balances. So right there, you've got a package of reforms and an enforcement mechanism so that people are going to be able to save money and plan their finances in a much more responsible way. Some people may have also noticed that there are a number of changes that credit card companies have made on their statements. One in particular, a box that shows that if you don't just pay your minimum payment and you're not paying your full payment, that it's going to cost you X amount more. essentially doing the interest calculation for you so that you can see it in a very clear way. Well, that wasn't something that the credit card companies just decided to do out of the goodness of their heart. They did it because we had passed a credit card reform law earlier, and now we've got additional enforcement mechanisms for it. Now, that's just on the credit card side. On the mortgage front, we're going to be able to make sure that mortgage brokers are not steering you towards a more expensive mortgage because they're getting a hidden kickback from the mortgage issuer. There's going to be a standard of care, meaning that mortgage brokers have to operate in an honest and transparent way with you, and if they don't, they're going to be subject to penalties. On mortgages, on credit cards, on student loans, on payday loans, on a whole host of credit issues, the consumer is going to now not only have more security and protection, but they're also going to have somebody whose sole job is to look out for them at the federal level and working with states' attorney generals and other consumer advocates. And overall, I think what this is going to result in is people having more control over their finances, and hopefully they're going to be saving money.
In fact, you've called this the strongest consumer financial protection system in history. Right. Sometimes that brings unintended consequences. Right. And already the credit card companies are starting to bring back annual fees, and the banks are doing away with free checking. What kind of recourse do consumers have when that happens?
Well, one of the things that we encourage in this reform is just better information. So if you are able to shop online for the best fees and or the best deal from a credit card company, if you can go to a website and have somebody let you know, I get a better deal from that company than I do from this company, that's going to empower you. And so much of what needs to be done in the consumer area is to empower the consumer so that they can make good choices. They can make the best choices. There are already good deals out there. You make a wonderful living helping people make good decisions. But what we want to do is to make that more widespread so that consumers have the information they need in order to look out for their families and their own interests.
You know, the law relies heavily on regulators to detect and deter problems.
Right.
But as an example, the SEC knew about Bernie Madoff. Whistleblowers had spelled it out,
right.
And yet the agency failed to act. So I'd like to know, why do you think this new agency and these new regulators will do any better?
Well, you're absolutely right that regulations are only as good as the regulators who are applying them. And what we have done is provided a framework in which we are assuring that the regulators have the power to scrutinize systemic risks in the financial system that could lead to another financial meltdown of the sort that we had, that are making sure that complex derivatives are in a open market that people can see and can be monitored. But we've got to have good regulators there, people who are serious about their job, who understand that they are looking out for the public interest, that aren't subject to industry capture. And those are all things that we're going to have to spend a lot of time on, a lot of energy on, and some of these big systemic reforms are going to take several years to put into place. But if we don't have this kind of framework, then what you end up having is a whole bunch of agencies splintered, not really focused, without clear lines of responsibility, and in some cases no clear authority. And that's part of what led to the crisis that has obviously devastated ordinary families over the last 2 years.
Maybe they should be called not-so-safe deposit boxes. Carla Ruff's box was drilled, seized, and turned over to the state of California. Owner unknown.
I was appalled.
Unknown? Carla's name was right on documents in the box. So was her address, a house about 6 blocks from the bank. Carla had a checking account at the bank too, still does, and receives regular statements. Plus, she has receipts showing she's the kind of person who paid her box rental fee.
They're zealously uncovering accounts that are not unclaimed.
What's worse, Carla discovered the loss when she went to her box to retrieve important paperwork she needed because her husband was dying. Those papers had been shredded, and that's not all.
She's wearing the pearls.
Her great-grandmother's precious natural pearls and other jewelry had been auctioned off, sold for less than $1,800, even though they were appraised for $82,000.
These things were things that she gave to me, and I valued them because I loved her.
Carla Ruff is not alone. Attorney Bill Palmer represents her and countless other citizens in a class action lawsuit.
They figured that the safety deposit box was safer than keeping it under their mattress. And in the case of a lot of citizens, they were wrong, weren't they?
Some states keep unclaimed property in a special trust fund, but others, like California, dump it into the general fund.
You acknowledge that you inherited a situation where the state was using this free money.
That's absolutely correct.
In fact, ABC News obtained an internal memo in which the attorney for the Bureau of Unclaimed Property argued against expanding programs to notify rightful owners. He wrote it could well result in additional claims of monies that would otherwise flow into the general fund.
What we've done here over the last 2 decades has been dead wrong. Right? We've kept the property and not provided owners with the best opportunities to get their property back.
It's not just safe deposit boxes. A British man went to retire and discovered that the $4 million in U.S. stock he had been counting on had been seized and sold for just $200,000 years earlier. A Sacramento family lost out on railroad land rights ancestors had owned for generations.
If I'd hang on to it, would be millionaire, multimillionaire.
And it's not just California. In Delaware, unclaimed property is the third largest source of state revenue. Idaho now keeps unclaimed property permanently if the rightful owners don't claim it within 10 short years. And all 50 states pay private contractors to seize accounts for them. It's an inherent conflict of interest. The more rightful owners are found, the less money the contractors make. And let's face it, in the internet era, most people are easy to find.
Do you see your own address on there?
I do.
I found you in about 5 minutes. So what's preventing you from finding the rightful owners of all this property?
No, we're making our best efforts.
If California does get better at reuniting people with their property, that could present another challenge. Remember, right now the state spends the money.
It's like the last guy in a line at a pizza parlor. There's only so much pizza. At the end, when I get up to the counter to claim my pizza, there may be no pizza for me.
I don't want my legacy to say I continued a broken program. I want my legacy to say that, this guy was the guy who truly cared about the people and returned their money.
But of course, it's impossible to return Carla Ruff's precious family heirlooms.
Carla has settled with her bank, Bank of America, which says it deeply regrets the situation. And last year, the courts ordered California to stop seizing people's property until it made reforms. And several of those changes are now in place.
With our series Stealing You, here's ABC's Elisabeth Leamy.
You are a commodity. Thieves buy and sell people's identities 24/7 in fast-paced chat rooms. Our guide is Dan Clements of CardCops.com, a company that has infiltrated this internet underworld to look out for its clients.
Right now, these hackers are in here in real time, buying and selling your personal information.
Such as credit card numbers for $1 or less if you buy in bulk. Full profiles, including social security number and mother's maiden name for $80. ATM pins and platinum cards cost extra. Here's a Russian criminal website where you can click next to people's identities and put them in your cart.
It's just like you're shopping online. It just so happens that they're selling credit cards.
We find 187 identity thieves in a single chat room, and I start sending them messages. Somebody named Romantic Time is the first to bite.
And the lingo is important, so I don't want to be too formal. How much CC?
He tells me he can sell me 40 CCs, or credit card numbers, for $1.50 each.
Here's my new line. You a ripper?
Ironically, the crooks are obsessed with whether other thieves are going to rip them off. So I ask for some free samples to prove he's got the goods.
Oh my goodness, here it is, a sample.
In less than 5 minutes, Romantic Time provides 5 samples. Americans' names, credit card numbers, addresses, and phone numbers. We immediately called the victims to warn them.
I had no idea. It's scary. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Andy from California was one of them.
So when I tell you that somebody offered me your identity as a free sample, what's your reaction?
Shocked, a little upset and angry. You don't know where to go first, what to do about it, who to call.
It looks like crooks snatched Andy's information by hacking into a website where he shops. So who are the identity thieves?
The typical hacker we are pursuing is not your 17-year-old sitting in the basement of his home typing away on the computer. It is an organized criminal group, usually based in Eastern Europe, and they are going after large-scale financial gains.
Problem is, the U.S. government doesn't have jurisdiction over criminals in other countries.
The hackers know this, and a lot of them are in anti-U.S. countries, and they know that. So they blatantly go in these rooms and buy and sell data because they have no fear of U.S. law enforcement.
To get to the bottom of this, Elisabeth Leamy went undercover in North Carolina.
The chase is on to capture suspected counterfeiters and shut down an underworld of fakes. It may look like sheer chaos, but this is actually a carefully executed sting. Hours before the raid, the North Carolina Secretary of State's office gathers police officers from across the state to launch Operation Faux Pas.
Around this area right here is where the DVDs and the shoes and pocketbooks going to be.
They have to catch vendors actually selling the fakes to press charges, so 4 undercover teams will go in first.
Sergeant King's team is going to make a buy. They're going to have the vendor under surveillance.
Why so aggressive? Because of this woman, Secretary of State Elaine Marshall.
If we can make it, somebody can fake it.
Marshall's office runs the most intense anti-counterfeiting operation in the country. They've seized more than $12 million worth of fakes in the past year alone.
Organized crime has found that we as Americans think it's funny to buy something that we clearly know is a knockoff.
You can buy fake products at a fraction of the price, but at what cost? Marshall says some are dangerous, others made by child labor. Plus, North Carolina has seized illegal drugs and weapons that were shipped right alongside the counterfeits.
No, we're seriously talking about organized crime, laundering things through South America and bringing them into America.
Hey, how much?
Back at the flea market, we are undercover too.
If you're looking for a brown one, Louis Vuitton.
Suddenly, vendors start to pack up.
Where are you guys going? Oh, they said the cops are out here, so we're talking.
Some take off running, but they don't get far.
Did you not hear me tell you to stop?
Meanwhile, flea market patrons rush in to steal the vendors' abandoned merchandise.
How the hell do you think you'll get away with all these police officers out here? I thought they were free.
Officers start confiscating suspected fakes, enough to fill a flatbed truck.
That's the 2 boxes.
That's 2 boxes right there.
If they spot enough counterfeit merchandise in a vendor's vehicle, they can confiscate that too.
You name it, they have it in there.
Police arrest 6 suspects in all. When we talk to them, most deny selling counterfeits or being part of a larger network.
I didn't sell anything to anybody.
Because of North Carolina's tough stance, they could face felony charges.
Do you realize what a risk that is in this state?
Now I do.
Authorities say often the vendors are low-level players forced to sell to pay off a debt.
Are they making you work out here selling this stuff?
Later, at a secret warehouse nearby, officers count and catalog all the merchandise, now evidence in criminal cases. The final tally, more than $700,000 in confiscated counterfeits.
And counterfeiters are getting better at making fakes that look like the real thing, with the right stitching on purses, the right mechanics on watches, and so on. But there is always one sure way to know a fake, and that is if the price is way lower than it normally would be. George?
ABC's Elisabeth Leamy is the one to take us behind the scenes.
It's like hazing for cars. Engineering as an extreme sport. These are the tests the leaner, meaner General Motors is putting its vehicles through. Tests the public has never seen before. We had unprecedented access to the GM Proving Ground, one of the most secretive sites in the automotive world. Our tour guide on this wild ride is James Bell, GM's new head of consumer affairs, an audacious choice because he spent years slamming car companies as an automotive journalist, once calling GM's Cadillac Cimarron an awful little car, and the Buick LaCrosse a real letdown.
I guess you never thought you'd be doing this job.
Never in a million years.
After all, GM is the car company that produced infamous Chevy Vegas in the 1970s, wobbly X cars in the 80s, mediocre Saturns in the 90s, and just plain ugly Pontiac Aztecs in the 2000s. That's why GM's post-bailout strategy is to improve its reliability and its reputation with more and more extreme testing. First up, wicked weather. Every car on the assembly line endures the water test booth.
And when I push this button,
The torrent will begin, yes.
okay, here we go.
Our car disappears as it's pelted with nearly 7,000 gallons in 8 minutes.
So it's not just about keeping the passengers dry, but also keeping the engine dry.
Passengers are almost secondary.
Not surprisingly, we stayed dry. GM didn't show us any cars that might actually fail a test. Water falling is one threat.
Yes.
Water rising is another.
We've only been doing this for the last couple weeks, actually.
This water trough tests a car's ability to keep passengers safe in floodwaters.
It seems like you're testing not only for what you want people to do with the cars, but for what they actually will do.
That's right. It's the extremes. I mean, the vehicle has to be shown that it can handle what crazy people do.
For the first time ever, GM allowed an outsider to film its climatic wind tunnel. At the test track, another first.
I actually get to drive. They're letting me do this.
15 miles per hour.
Ooh, oh my God! I could do this for a living. Oh. Okay, that was worse than DC where I live.
Next, we navigate a ditch so deep the size is a trade secret. The truck performs well, but that's not always the case. Despite this extensive testing, the new General Motors has issued 14 safety recalls so far this year, and Consumer Reports ranks it 12th out of 13 car companies for reliability.
Some models do very well, others not so much. Why is that?
We believe in the products we're developing. We believe that process is certainly improving.
Is it too little too late?
Well, I certainly hope not. We recognize the ills of our past, but do yourself a favor and compare us again.
The company's crash test results are far better than in the past, according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, which has named some General Motors vehicles top picks for safety. GM now conducts more than 50 different crashes before releasing a new model. We're about to see how they do it. And then GM pulls the plug because they're crashing a car that hasn't been released yet.
This is obviously very sensitive. If there's something that needs to be fixed, we want to make sure that's all done well before any consumer or anybody's considering these brands to know anything about it.
Okay, 50.7.
We persuade them to let us shoot the multi-ton barrier hurtling toward the car.
Ooh, oh gosh.
Just like that. A truck has just hit the side of that car.
What we just saw and heard was a T-bone crash similar to this one. We've seen a breathtaking series of splashes and crashes, but for the new GM, the true test is whether more people will buy its cars. For Nightline, I'm Elisabeth Leamy in Milford, Michigan.
Hi, just writing to let you know my trip to Manila, Philippines with my family has been a mess.
The email came from 10,000 miles away, pleading for help and money.
It has been an awful experience. I was hit at the back of my neck with a club.
It landed in our producer's inbox a few weeks ago, and she suspected it was another instance of one of the most popular online cons going these days. One the FBI says costs Americans millions of dollars a year. It's called the Stranded Traveler Scam.
I need you to loan me some money. I'll refund it to you as soon as I arrive home.
Instead of hitting delete, our producer, Sally, decided to play along.
Okay, don't worry. I think I can come up with a few hundred at least.
and see if it would lead us to the offshore hustler preying on hundreds of unsuspecting victims.
I am just still very upset how people can do this.
This is Susan Zador, and it was her email the conman had hacked. He then used her contacts list to send out the plea for nearly $2,000, pretending he was Susan.
Pretty disheartening to think that people are that money hungry that they'll just send it out to whoever they think they can get the most money out of.
Susan's son told us every contact in her email address book, hundreds of people received the same alarming message we did. Her friend Mary Blackwell sent $300 before learning it was a scam.
And I'm like, what? I mean, I went through the roof. I was so upset. Not because I sent the money or anything like that, but it was because my heart was broken for Susan.
The person pretending to be Susan told us he was traveling with somebody named Richard Kamenitzer and to wire the money to Richard in Manila.
Do you know a Susan Zador in California?
No, I do not.
Okay, well, the bad guys are claiming that you and Susan are over in the Philippines together. That could get you in some trouble, couldn't it?
With my wife, especially.
Yeah.
We tracked down the real Richard Kamenitzer, a professor in Virginia. His email had been hijacked the same day, and friends were worried.
Professor Kamenitzer, this is Jamie. I received an email from your Yahoo account saying you were mugged and hit. Please let me know you're fine.
The hackers even managed to block Richard's access to his own address book, so he had no easy way to alert friends.
That I had 4,036 contacts in my address book, none of which were now available to me. Everything was lost.
Back online, instead of sending nearly $2,000 like our new pen pal had requested, we sent $20 via Western Union.
Philippines is the destination.
Within hours, he wrote back and had the nerve to complain.
You should have told me you never had any money.
But he had a helpful suggestion.
I think you can also have the money wired with the use of your credit card.
We followed the trail to the Philippines. An alert Western Union agent told us a suspected scammer had come into this shop to cash in. I remembered that he had claimed money from me in the past, he said. I checked the previous photocopy of his ID and compared it to the new one. Same face, but different names.
So you really need this new space.
Next stop, the FBI's secretive Internet Crime Complaint Center in West Virginia, where Special Agent Charles Pavlitas gave us a rare look inside.
This is where we store all 2.477 million complaints that we received since the beginning of the project.
The FBI has about 150,000 stranded traveler complaints on file. The phony emails often feature the subject line, "I am writing with tears in my eyes."
So very melodramatic crooks.
Here we now have 2,600 complaints of people with tears in their eyes. Now, if I get this.
A lot of crying crooks.
We learned that if you ignore the scammers, they can sound increasingly desperate.
Sally, talk to me. Talk to me, dear. Act as urgent, please. Please, I beg you, in the name of God.
Wire services don't disclose where the criminals pick up your money, and law enforcement almost never pursues these cases. So good luck getting anything back.
There's only so much time and so many resources that prosecutors and investigators have.
Once you fall for it, the con artists put you on their sucker list and hit you with other scams. Sure enough, our producer recently started getting new emails phishing for her bank account number. This time, we hit delete. For Nightline, I'm Elisabeth Leamy in Washington.